Now to a shocking and undercovered story. Temperatures inside United States prison cells have routinely exceeded 120 degrees, as conservative politicians across the South are resisting calls to install air conditioning in cells. At least 14 prisoners in Texas die from extreme heat every year. 3/4 of Florida prisons do not have AC. Over 2/3 of Texas prison beds do not have air conditioning, and many prisons across the South lack complete air conditioning. Inmates in Texas have resorted to drinking toilet water to cool off. This is all according to a lawsuit an inmate filed against the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Quote, "If cooking someone to death does not amount to cruel and unusual punishment, then nothing does," the lawsuit states. But some lawmakers are resistant to allotting millions of dollars to improve these conditions.
Florida Senator Jonathan Martin said he was not aware of any health and safety issues in the Florida prison system regarding AC and rejected a $582 million proposal to install air conditioning in all Florida prisons, asking, quote, "Is it worth the investment?" Democratic Arizona Representative Annalise Ortiz, who has served on the state's Independent Prison Oversight Commission and has advocated for adding AC to jails, said, "We hear a lot of people say if they couldn't do the time, they shouldn't have done the crime, and that mentality is really frustrating. It's very counterproductive that some of my colleagues do not see this as a priority." I think Ortiz gets it absolutely right. I mean, this issue, again, I mentioned I used to work on criminal justice reform policy, and when we would talk to people on the phone and voters about mandatory minimum sentencing and how long somebody should stay in prison, you would hear this on the phone all the time with voters. Well, if they can't do the time, they shouldn't have done the crime. But you're going, I'm asking you how much time for this crime, and they don't know. All they know is that they want bad people who have committed crimes behind bars, and all people who are in the prison system in the mind of most voters are bad. This seems to me like a matter of just like human brokenness, where we don't have a culture of empathy, forgiveness, and care, even in our prison system.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to give you credit for bringing this story to my attention and to our attention. I was completely unaware of this particular topic, the AC in jails and the horrendous circumstances and conditions that we just outlined. And I do agree with you that it is criminal justice reform, and prison reform in particular, is enormously difficult to move forward politically, because anytime you suggest it, the argument is always that you're being soft on crime, that you're coddling criminals, and inevitably there will be an example found of some person in perhaps a prison like the ones that we're discussing who has committed some truly heinous crime. And then it becomes, so you want to give air conditioning to this guy who, you know, killed a 6-year-old or whatever. And then you get stuck. And I think the thing that many people do find frustrating is the nature of what we're describing there sort of short circuits things that would clearly be to society's benefit, not only in terms of prison conditions, but in terms of, for example, rehabilitating people who have served time in prison and are then released. All of those topics get kind of lost.
Yeah, the recidivism rate for people who go through the prison system is not helped. You are sending out people who have been traumatized, abused, raped multiple times, and in many ways tortured when you're talking about the hot and cold conditions inside these dilapidated prisons. And then you're sending them back out into the community and going, all right, do good out there. And they're not going to do good out there at all. We don't have a system that sets people up for success. And again, people always imagine the child killer in prisons. But they don't want to talk about Jerome Murdoch in Rikers, who died in 2014. He served in the military, he was a veteran, and then he started dealing with bipolar schizophrenia, and he had a misdemeanor felony. And he ended up behind bars, and he died in Rikers of heat exhaustion. He was just killed by the heat, and he was said to have cooked alive. And this is happening in Texas to 14, 16 people a year. And the only state that has actually taken any kind of action on this is my old friends down in North Carolina, who have actually, with a Republican legislature, a pretty conservative Republican legislature, invested millions of dollars into the prison system because the sentence, is 4, 10, 20 years in prison, not death by cooking inside your jail cell.
Yeah, absolutely horrific stuff. And the kind of happening or event that really does, I think, just reduce us all as a society, that some things or such things can happen without any significant alteration to those conditions. In the North Carolina instance that you mentioned, and since you're from there, you may know a lot more about the sort of granular details of that than I would. Are there any lessons politically as to how those kind of changes can be made work? I know you say it's a Republican-led legislature, but are there arguments that are transferable to other states or for that matter, to a federal level that work?
The North Carolina example is exceptional. It was a $30 million investment in the prison and corrections system. And a lot of the messaging that you see does not always apply to the comfort levels of the inmates in the prison population, but also the officers, the corrections officers who have to work in there. And there are cases that are studied in the Politico article on this, where the corrections officers are also like, I am also in this building with these people who are very, very hot, very, very angry, and this is hurting all of us. It makes my job so much more dangerous. So even just having air conditioning added to the workplace for people who work inside prisons is you being on the side of law enforcement. Right. And that right there, I think, is the message. When you talk about law and order, rule of law, you cannot have a society in which you've got gulag-type prisons that look like something out of a horror movie. You actually have to have a system that people can be proud of and say, we have rule of law here. Prisoners are not dying in the middle of night of heat or cold. They are not being raped multiple times throughout the day. We protect people who are unfortunate enough to enter this system, and we hope they succeed when they get out.
Right, and when they get out, we don't want them to have been further brutalized by their experiences while incarcerated, whether those come in the form of assault from other inmates or from, for that matter, guards. But we also don't want them just brutalized by the conditions themselves, by the sense that they're, boiling to a point where their health is in danger or they're drinking toilet water. There's nobody who's forced to drink toilet water who comes out a kinder, gentler person, I assume.
No, and advocates have always been divided on this issue, particularly the issue of sexual violence in prisons. A couple of years ago, there was an article in the Los Angeles Times, an op-ed, arguing in favor of condom distribution inside prisons. And right there, you actually have a really sticky issue, which is that you're talking about handing out protection to people for sexual intercourse in prison, a lot of times violent rape. Are you encouraging the activity by providing condoms? Or do you need to actually invest in the law enforcement in the building, the physical safety of people? Because that right there, that's sort of not how I would think that you want to approach safety in prisons.
Right, but the visceral nature of issues like that, and I mean also just the issue of incarceration and criminal justice generally, it seems to spark such a sort of visceral pushback that it's very difficult to actually get some of these policies through.
Yeah, the politics are almost impossible.
For sure. Well, somber topic. We may return to it some other time, but stick with us for more Rising after this.